I still remember the exact moment the rain hit the stained glass window of the chapel. It sounded like someone tapping gently, asking to be let in. My father's casket sat at the front, polished oak gleaming under the soft lights, and I stood there in my black coat, hands clasped so tight my knuckles ached. That's when my husband, Daniel, leaned close, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "After this, you won't be coming back to the condo. I've changed the locks. It's mine now." The words landed like cold stones in my stomach. I didn't turn to look at him. I just kept staring at the spray of white lilies on the casket, their scent heavy and sweet in the damp air. $30 million worth of glass and steel overlooking the city skyline. The place my father had quietly bought years ago as a quiet escape for us both. Daniel thought he'd won something. He had no idea. The service ended in a blur of murmured condolences and damp handshakes. People pressed tissues into my palm, told me how much my father had meant to them. Daniel stood beside me the whole time, his arm around my waist like he was comforting me. His grip was firm, possessive. I felt the weight of his wedding band against my side and remembered how, 10 years earlier, he'd slipped it on my finger under a different sky. Sunny, hopeful, full of promises neither of us kept. We drove home in silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind where every breath feels measured. Rain streaked the windows of the car, blurring the city lights into long golden smears. Daniel kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my knee as if to remind me he was still in control. I stared out at the wet streets and thought about my father's study. The old leather chair that still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco. The drawer where he kept important papers locked with a small brass key he wore on a chain around his neck. When we pulled into the underground garage of the condo building, Daniel killed the engine and turned to me. His face was calm, almost kind. "Let's go up," he said. "You can pack a few things tonight. I'll call a car for you in the morning." I nodded slowly, like I was still in shock. Maybe part of me was. The elevator ride up felt endless. The soft ding of each floor echoed in the small space. When the doors opened on the penthouse level, Daniel stepped out first, key fob already in hand. He swiped it against the panel. Nothing. He tried again. The light stayed red. He frowned, swiped harder. Still red. I watched him from the doorway of the elevator, arms folded. The hallway lights cast long shadows across the marble floor. "What the hell?" he muttered. He pulled out his phone, tapped at the screen, called the building manager. No answer. It was late. The funeral had run long. He turned to me, eyes narrowing. "Did you do something to the locks?" I didn't answer right away. I just stepped past him, reached into my coat pocket, and pulled out a small brass key, the one that had hung around my father's neck until the hospital took it off. I slid it into the old-fashioned lock beside the modern panel. A soft click. The door opened. Daniel's face went blank. Inside, the condo smelled the same as always. Clean linen, a hint of lemon polish, and the faint salt of the ocean breeze that came through the floor-to-ceiling windows even on rainy nights. My father's presence lingered in every corner. The worn Persian rug he brought back from Istanbul, the bookshelf filled with dog-eared classics, the small crystal decanter he kept half full of scotch he never drank anymore. I walked to the kitchen island, set my purse down, and turned on the pendant light above it. A warm circle of gold spilled across the quartz. Daniel followed me in, door closing behind him with a heavy thud. "How did you?" "Sit down, Daniel," I said quietly. He didn't move. I pulled out one of the bar stools and sat myself. "Please." He hesitated, then sat across from me. His hands rested on the counter, fingers laced tight. "Your father left this place to me," I began. "Not to us, to me. The deed was transferred 5 years ago, after his first heart scare. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of. Without strings. Without anyone else being able to touch it." Daniel laughed once, short and sharp. "That's not possible. We're married. Community property." "The condo was never marital property," I said. "It was a gift, solely in my name. My father's lawyer made sure of it. There's a trust attached. You can't even put a lien on it without my signature." His jaw tightened. I could see the calculations running behind his eyes. The months he'd spent quietly forging documents, talking to shady real estate friends, convincing himself he could rewrite the rules because I'd always let him lead. "I thought," he started, then stopped. "You never said anything about it being yours alone." "You never asked," I replied. My voice stayed even. "You assumed it was ours because we lived here, because I let you think that, because for years I let you think a lot of things." The rain tapped harder against the glass. Somewhere in the city below, a siren wailed, then faded. Daniel looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. "So what now?" he asked. "You throw me out?" I studied his face, the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when we met, the gray creeping into his hair. He looked smaller somehow. "No," I said. "Not tonight, but tomorrow you'll pack what's yours. and then we'll talk about the rest. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the window, and pressed his forehead against the cool glass. I didn't move. I just sat there, listening to the rain, feeling the quiet weight of everything that had been hidden finally coming into the light. That night, I didn't sleep in our bedroom. Couldn't. Instead, I walked barefoot across the cool hardwood to the guest room at the far end of the hall, the one my father used when he stayed over during his last months. The sheets still carried the faint trace of the lavender sachets he liked to tuck under the pillows. I pulled the duvet up to my chin and lay there listening to the building settle. The low hum of the HVAC, the occasional creak of steel contracting in the night wind, the distant murmur of traffic 30 floors below. Daniel didn't come looking for me. I heard him pacing the living room for a while, the soft clink of ice in a glass, then the television murmuring low, some late-night news channel he never really watched. Eventually the sounds stopped. I pictured him stretched out on the sectional, one arm thrown over his eyes, pretending to sleep. We had done this dance before, these long silences after arguments neither of us wanted to name. But this time the silence felt different. Final. Morning arrived gray and heavy. Rain had stopped, but the sky stayed low, pressing against the windows. I rose early, made coffee the way my father taught me. Slow pour over grounds, no machine, just patience. The kettle hissed. Steam rose in thin curls. When the coffee was ready, I carried 2 mugs to the living room. Daniel was already awake, sitting on the edge of the sofa, elbows on knees, staring at his phone. He looked up when I set the mug in front of him. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Thank you," he said. The words came out small. I sat in the armchair across from him. The distance between us felt wider than the rug. "I called Marcus last night," I said. Marcus was my father's attorney for 30 years, the man who'd drawn up every trust, every codicil, every quiet instruction my father ever gave. He confirmed everything. The condo, the accounts tied to it, even the parking space. All mine. There's a letter from Dad too. He wrote it 6 months before he passed. Marcus read it to me over the phone. Daniel's shoulders dropped a fraction. "What did it say?" I took a slow sip of coffee. It was still too hot. "He said he loved me enough to protect me from the people who might one day forget what love looks like. He said he watched us for years. He never said a word because he wanted me to see it for myself." Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. "I wasn't trying to steal from you. Then what were you trying to do?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "I was scared. The firm's been letting people go. My bonus got cut in half last year. I thought, if something happened to you or if we split, I'd have nothing. I thought this place was the only safety net we had. I thought I was protecting us. By forging documents?" I asked quietly. "By changing locks on the day of my father's funeral?" He flinched. I didn't think it through. I panicked. The room was very still. Outside, a gull cried once, sharp and lonely. I set my mug down. "You didn't just panic, Daniel. You planned. For months. I found the emails on your laptop 2 weeks ago. Your conversation with that broker in Miami, the one who specializes in quiet transfers. I saw the draft affidavit you were going to file claiming I was mentally unfit after Dad died. You were going to use the stress of the funeral as evidence." His mouth opened, then closed. Color drained from his face. "I didn't read them to hurt you," I continued. "I read them because I kept smelling something wrong. Little things. You asking about Dad's safe deposit box more than once. The way you changed the subject whenever I mentioned the deed. The late-night calls you took in the study with the door closed. I told myself I was being paranoid. Grief makes you see shadows everywhere. But the shadows were real." He stared at the floor. "I'm sorry." The apology hung there, fragile. I stood up. "I'm not asking for sorry right now. I'm asking you to leave. Today. I'll give you 30 days to find a place. After that, we file for divorce. Clean. No contest. You keep what's yours, the car, your investments, the things we bought together. I keep this. And we both walk away before we destroy whatever's left of the good years we had." He looked up at me then, really looked. "You're not going to ruin me?" "I could," I said. "I could take everything to court. Show the emails, the forged signatures, the broker's records. You'd lose your license, maybe face charges. But I don't want that. I don't want to spend the next 5 years of my life in depositions and anger. I just want to breathe again." He nodded slowly. Tears slipped down his cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. "I'll pack." I walked to the window and looked out over the city. The clouds were finally breaking. Thin bars of sunlight cut across the river. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of space. The rest of the morning passed in quiet efficiency. Daniel packed 2 suitcases and a box of files. I helped him carry them to the elevator. When the doors opened on the garage level, he paused. "I loved you," he said. "I still do. I just forgot how." "I know," I answered. And I did. He stepped inside. The doors closed. I stood there until the indicator light showed the lobby, then turned and rode back up alone. The condo felt bigger without him in it. Not empty, never empty, because my father's things were still everywhere, but open. I opened every window, let the salt air sweep through. I made more coffee, sat at the kitchen island, and opened the letter Marcus had couriered over that morning. My father's handwriting was shaky but clear. "My dearest girl," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone and you found out what I did. I didn't want to burden you while I was still here, but I needed to know you'd be safe. Not rich, safe. Because love isn't enough if it comes with strings. You deserve a place no one can take from you. Not even the man you married. If he's still there when you read this, tell him I said thank you for the years he gave you before he forgot who you were. And then tell him to go. You'll be all right. You always have been." I folded the letter and pressed it to my lips. Then I cried. Not the loud, broken sobs of the funeral, but the quiet kind that wash everything clean. The days after Daniel left were strangely quiet. Not the hollow quiet of loss, but the kind that lets you hear your own thoughts again. I woke each morning to the same soft light filtering through the sheer curtains, made the same slow coffee, and sat at the same island counter where we'd once planned vacations we never took. The difference was the space around me. No more footsteps in the hallway at odd hours. No more half-read financial magazines left open on the coffee table. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. I started small. I called the building manager and had the electronic lock reprogrammed so only my fob and the old brass key worked. I changed the Wi-Fi password. I boxed up the things Daniel had left behind. A few ties still hanging in the closet, his favorite mug with the cracked handle, the leather portfolio he used for client meetings, and had them delivered to the small apartment he'd rented downtown. No note, just the box and a courier receipt. Closure didn't need words anymore. My sister, Elena, came over the following weekend. She brought takeout from the Thai place Dad loved, pad cew and mango sticky rice, and we ate sitting cross-legged on the living room rug like we were teenagers again. The city glittered beyond the windows, indifferent and beautiful. She watched me for a long time before she spoke. "You look lighter." I smiled a little. "I feel lighter, tired, but lighter." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "He called me yesterday, asked if I'd talk to you, said he made a mistake." "Did you talk to him?" "I listened," she said. "Then I told him the truth, that you're not the one who needs forgiving right now." I nodded. The food was warm in my mouth, comforting in its familiarity. "I don't hate him, Elena. I just don't want to carry him anymore." She leaned back against the sofa. "Dad would be proud of you." "I think he already was," I said. He saw this coming long before I did. We finished the meal in comfortable silence, the way only sisters can. When she left, she hugged me at the door longer than usual. "Call me if you need anything, or if you don't, just call." After she was gone, I walked through the condo room by room. I opened drawers I hadn't touched in years. In the study, I found a small wooden box Dad kept on the top shelf. Inside were photographs. Me at 5 holding his hand on a beach, the two of us laughing at some forgotten picnic, a Polaroid of him and Mom before she got sick, both of them young and hopeful. At the bottom was a folded note in his handwriting. "If you're reading this, you've kept going. That's all I ever wanted." I pressed the note to my chest and sat on the floor until the sun went down. Weeks turned into months. I went back to work. Quiet days at the foundation Dad helped start, helping families who'd lost someone too soon. I laughed more easily. I slept through the night. I started walking the waterfront path every morning, letting the salt wind push the last of the heaviness out of my lungs. One evening I stood at the window watching the lights come on across the river. The city looked the same, but I didn't. I thought about Daniel, not with anger, but with a kind of distant sadness, the way you remember a house you once lived in that isn't yours anymore. I hoped he was finding his way. I hoped he learned something. Mostly, I hoped he let himself feel the weight of what he'd done so he wouldn't do it again. I wasn't lonely. I was alone, and there's a difference. Alone meant I could hear the rain again without wondering what it was hiding. Alone meant the condo was truly mine. Not a battleground, not a prize, just home. And in that quiet, I finally understood what Dad had been trying to give me all along. Not just 4 walls and a view, but the freedom to walk away from anything that tried to own me. Looking back now, I realized the condo was never really about the money, or the view, or even the marble floors that still catch the sunrise the same way they did when Dad first showed me the place. It was about trust, the kind you give freely, and the kind that gets taken when someone decides they deserve more than they've earned. Daniel and I never spoke again after that last elevator ride. I heard through mutual friends that he moved to a smaller apartment across town, took a pay cut to stay at the firm, started seeing a counselor. I didn't feel triumph when I heard it. I just felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a long storm has finally passed. Sometimes I still sit at that kitchen island with a cup of coffee that's gone cold, and I think about forgiveness. Not the kind that wipes the slate clean like it never happened, but the kind that lets you set the slate down so you don't have to keep carrying it. I forgave him enough to let him go. I forgave myself enough to stay. Dad taught me that real protection isn't walls or locks or millions in the bank. It's knowing your own worth so clearly that no one can rewrite it for you. So I ask you the way I've asked myself on too many quiet nights. When someone tries to take what was never theirs to begin with, how long do you let them stay inside your life before you turn the key? Would you have done what I did? Or would you have fought harder, louder, longer? Tell me in the comments below. Your stories remind me I'm not alone in learning these hard, beautiful lessons. And if this touched something in you today, maybe share it with someone who needs to hear that they deserve to keep what's truly theirs. Thank you for sitting with me.